Okay, so thank you for the introduction. So indeed, in this talk, I'm going to present some spintronics devices that can be used for neuromorphic computing, and how, in particular, the physics can be seen quite differently than from memory, and give two very special features for neuromorphic. And so all this work has been done with my students and also former postdocs, in particular Joe, who is here and now has his own group at UT Dallas. And a lot of the works I'm going to present are in collaboration with the lab of Julie Grolier at the CNRS Dallas Lab. So I had slides to introduce very basics of spintronics, but that's actually quite useless since we had the beautiful talk of Stuart Parkin yesterday. But basically, right now, for the spintronics that is being developed in industry, the flagship device is a magnetic tunnel junction, which is this nano device with two nanomagnets, and that really provides a non-volatile and fast resistive memory, which features high endurance compared with other emerging non-volatile memory. It's fully CMOS compatible, and you can really have design where the magnetic tunnel junctions are embedded in the back end of line of the CMOS. And basically, you have two memory states, depending one state where the two magnets are parallel, and one state where the two nanomagnets are anti-parallel. Actually, this is more like a kind of older kind of magnetic tunnel junctions. In the more modern designs, the magnetizations are perpendicular to the wafer. And this technology was academic, but has quickly gone into industry. And as we have seen yesterday, right now you can actually buy a standalone MRAM. So MRAM is a memory, SpinTorq MRAM is a memory that is based on magnetic tunnel junction. And also GlobalFoundries has announced they will have soon Foundry service where you have advanced CMOS and embedded SpinTorq magnetic memory. So actually, the fact that you have this kind of memory that is endurant and that is nice properties is really a breakthrough for electronics. And we have seen yesterday in the systems section example where we can really kind of rethink the basis of computers and microelectronics due to the emergence of this technology. But what I'm going to show in this talk is also that the physics of the device makes them more than simple memory switches. And actually, when you try to really understand and exploit the physics, you can use them in unconventional regimes that can give to quite interesting idea, especially for neuromorphic. And there are many research in this, actually, and Julie's lab and my lab, we developed several of them. But for this talk, I'm going to focus on one aspect, which is to exploit the stochastic effects that are inherent to spintronic devices. So the talk will be divided in two projects. So first, I'm going to show how we could use these magnetic tunnel junctions as synapses in neuromorphic systems. And then I'm going to present more radical idea where you kind of totally embrace stochastic effect in the device to make some kind of stochastic computing.
Are you going to define neuromorphic?
Am I going to define neuromorphic? Yes, I can do that. I was actually not going to, but that's easy to introduce. So first, magnetic memory is an amazing technology, but it has actually one significant drawback from a device point of view, is that the switching is stochastic. And that's actually measurements that were done by my colleague in my lab on the junctions. You can see, for example, the switching probability as a function of programming duration for different voltage. And you can see, really, you have, depending on the conditions, you have different probability to switch. And this probability effect is really not due to defects or something like this. It's really very intrinsic to the physics of spintronics. And it is actually a drawback, even in the industry development. The right error rate is an issue for this technology. And so you either need to extend the programming pulse to ensure the right error rate that you want, or either use system level solutions like error corrections or program and verify. And the point of view we took from bio-inspired computing point of view was to think, well, actually, is it really such necessarily a drawback? I mean, of course, for most applications it is, but aren't there applications where we could actually use this random aspect? Because random numbers are actually quite hard to come with in standard microelectronics. And so that's what, that's this idea, really, that I'm going to go through this talk, because it gives us kind of free random numbers, and also it would allow us to use the device in a regime that is more energy efficient, where you could really harness this probabilistic regime. So because the physics, the effect is really intrinsic to the physics of the device, it is very well understood. So this is, for example, physicists have worked extensively in this, and this, for example, based on physical simulations that were verified in experiments, what the mean switching delay of a device looks as a function of the current density that is applied. And you can see that there are very different regimes. One regime that is really thermal switching, where you have slow programming, exponential programming time, and fast programming, where for higher currents. And actually, all the regimes are stochastic, and the switching probabilities, so this is a distribution of the switching time as a function of time, a different regime, can be quite different. And all this is quite understood from physics point of view. So what we did is actually, for our studies, to develop a more compact model with analytical equations that could fit all these stochastic regimes and be partly predictive and partly also fitable on experiments. And we use that to try to develop systems. And first system I'm going to present is actually a neuromorphic system. So that means that's a system that implements in hardware the architecture of a neural network. So you would have input neurons and output neurons that are really computing units, and that would be done with CMOS technology, connected directly by the spin-torque memory. And the spin-torque memory implements the connection, therefore the synapses in the neural network. And it's an architecture that, as a neural networks in theory or as a neural network in the brain, really co-integrate the memory and the computing unit. It's not a von Neumann type architecture. And so this view is kind of cartoonish view to understand how system works. But basically, when an input neuron is active, it will activate the column and produce current on the row that will depend actually on the memory state of the magnetic tunnel junction. And so the current that arrives to the output neuron is kind of weighted by the conductance of the magnetic tunnel junctions as in a neural network. And so that implements neural networks in a very efficient way. And also, interestingly, it is possible to implement learning. And for example, so still in this cartoonish view, the idea, what we propose is that when, so this particular system is based on packing neural networks, although its detail can be adapted otherwise. And so one of the output neurons becomes active. It would apply a voltage waveform on the row like this, while the input neurons that were active recently would apply a voltage waveform like this. And due to just implying these very simple voltage waveforms, actually implements a learning rule that allows the neural network to learn the weights. And this learning rule can be kind of represented this way. So it's a learning rule that can be called a simplified STDP. So STDP is for spike timing dependent plasticity. That's a learning rule that is often proposed, not necessarily for the artificial neural networks, but in neuroscience. And the idea is that depending on the relative time where input and output switch relatively to a synapse, the conductance of the synapses, so therefore the nano device, changes. And in this particular case, because the magnetic tunnel junctions are probabilistic, and with the voltage waveform that we chose to apply, this means that in some situations, a synapse has a probability to switch to the on state, and in other situations, the synapse would have a probability to switch to the off state. And this probabilistic aspect is really the probabilistic aspect of the physics of the device. And so, in fact, using this simple voltage waveform, the device would naturally implement a stochastic learning rule. And actually, it turns out that this very simplistic rule can be quite powerful. So this is system-level simulations. So simulations where each nano device is modeled with the compact model that I introduced before. And the neurons would be done CMOS. So what we do is actually, each input is connected to the pixel of a video, and we actually present the video to the system. And let the learning rule do its stuff. And actually, what we observe is that at the end, actually, whenever you have one vehicle passing on a lane of the video, you have one of the output neurons that becomes active. So each output neuron is specific to one lane of the freeway, and therefore the system has kind of become a vehicle counter. And interestingly, due to the specific nature of this STDP, this is unsupervised learning. You cannot really predict which output. You do not need, actually, when the video is presented, to tell on which lane a vehicle is passing. And at the end, naturally, each output neuron is going to become sensitive to one of the lanes, and the assignment is kind of random. It's due to, well, how the random numbers came out. And something that is also very interesting is that for this application, you actually need only one nano device per synapse. So you can use only 1 bit per synapse, and that works only because the programming is stochastic. If the programming were deterministic, you wouldn't have learning in this. Yep.
How many inputs and outputs and neurons do you have in your system?
So in this particular kind of tutorial application, you would have as many input neurons as you have pixels in the video, which I think is 784, and you actually have 20 output neurons, so you have some redundancy to make sure that each lane is really learned, is actually trained. And so this needs significant resources, and you can actually retain the same performance with more, much smaller crossbar by creating some kind of hierarchy where you have a first layer that is focused on smaller blocks, and then you connect on the second layer, and you can have exactly the same performance with much lesser nano devices. And I don't remember the number of how many nano devices that means in the end. But yeah, I present really the simplistic version of the architecture for explaining. And actually, it works very well. You have detection rate that is higher than 95%, false positive lower than 5%, which is similar to state-of-the-art on this kind of tasks. And really point I want to make is that the learning really comes from the physics of the nano device. But from the physics point of view, you have a very significant challenge, which is that in real life, the magnetic tunnel junctions are very variable. Like each of them are different. Like actually so this is kind of exaggerated, but real life is not that bad, but each nano device has actually a different resistance. And what's problematic is that this variability on resistance translates to even more variability on the switching probability. So that is what is presented here. You have distribution of, if you have this kind of variability on resistance, that's the kind of variability you would have on switching probabilities, and it depends on the programming regime you chose for the device. Yeah?
Is it possible to copy the training from one system to another?
Yes, absolutely, because the system is digital, but typically then that would be very long sequential operation. But yeah, because the system is binary digital, it's very easy to read and copy.
I'm not sure.
I think we keep the questions to the end.
But if you want to do this, you need to adapt the system to have really addressing capability. But yeah, we can discuss. It would be really possible. So yeah, so the device is very variable, but really where I'm going with this is to say that the system is actually surprisingly resilient to this kind of variability. So this is again system level simulation, and you see on the car, on the pedagogical car of vehicle counting, the detection rate and the number of false positives as a function of the variability, so that's Monte Carlo simulation. And you can see that the system is actually resilient, so it depends on which programming regime you chose. That's really due to the physics. But the system is actually resilient, for example, to up to, if you chose the intermediate current, to 10% of variability, which is the situation. So that's a situation of extreme variability. And typically, what is done seen in published industrial papers is around 5% of variability. So it's tolerated. And it's really due to this learning process where you need the device to have some probability to switch, but you don't really need to fine-tune the probability. And we have in paper much more investigation on the details about that. That's the power consumption that would be associated with the system, specifically about the magnetic tunnel junction, not the rest of the system, which, but it's actually dominant. And you can see that it depends dramatically on the programming regime you chose for the device, but, and you have an optimum where you don't operate the device at faster speed, but that turns out for the pedagogical task of car control, quite low energy consumption. And finally, I want to highlight, so way I presented the system is a little cartoonish, and it is based on the idea to have a 1R crossbar, so that means that the nano device are directly connected without access device, and that is often proposed in neuromorphic because this neuromorphic architecture is extremely parallel. It is theoretically possible to read and to write devices in parallel with relatively minimal sneak path issue, which is the issue of the 1R. But when you actually design the system, you realize that this architecture causes many problems. And as the devices here are very binary, if you rely on a more conventional architecture of STM-RAM, which is 1T&R, you can use many tricks, like kind of adapt your system, make it more sequential, use sense amplifiers that are extremely low energy for reading the device. And there is absolutely no doubt, in the case of neuromorphic with MRAM, that this architecture is considerably superior in terms of energy efficiency and scalability. So it's, at the moment, not really an option to use this one. So that was the first project. And the second project I'm going to present is something that is a little more advanced, and that's kind of trying the idea to push this concept further. So we go back to magnetic tunnel junction. So in this talk, I'm using kind of the classical ones that are parallel. And the idea, so it's typically magnetic tunnel junctions are optimized to be very good memories, to be very stable over duration of years, like you have two states that are separated by a very strong energy barrier, protecting the state of the device. But actually, it is also very possible and actually very easy to make them intentionally unstable, to make this energy barrier much lower so that the device will naturally switch due to thermal noise between the two memory states. And it's something that we did. So this is, for example, for one of these unstable junctions that are called super paramagnetic. The resistance, the electrical resistance as a function of time, and you see the device naturally switching between the two states. And if you look at the time the device takes to switch between two levels, you can see it follows in both states this exponential law that is characteristic of a Poisson process of something that is truly stochastic. So this device that really switches all the time due to noise seems apparently quite useless, but we actually believe it is very powerful. So the first thing you can use the device for is simply to generate random bits. And actually, that's something that we did. So we took some of these devices that we measured for extremely long duration of time to get billions of random bits. And so you can use these bits as random bits. Actually, you cannot use them randomly because it's very, even in theory, you would expect the two states to have equal stability. It's never exactly the same, and also it can vary a little due to temperature change. So if you want to use them as random bits, you need to have a little of processing, a little of whitening of the random bits. But you can do it kind of minimally. So for example, if you just XOR several of these bits, you actually get random bit stream that we tested on the basic tests for random bits that are the NIST statistical suites. And basically, you have 180 tests, and for it to pass, the pass rate was supposed to be in these green areas, and it actually passes. So this is also an illustration for the physics point of view that these devices are truly random. And also interestingly, the device really switch due to noise. You don't need to do anything to have them switch. And also, they switch. The state is provided directly into two resistance states that are very different from each other. So actually, if you want to extract the information, you can only use a sense amplifier that has extremely low energy consumption. So you can actually use this to provide random bits with extremely low energy. So that's actually only 20 femtojoule per bit, including the whitening process. So however, I have to warn that it is slow. It can scale only to something like 100 megahertz due to the basic physics of the device. And we think this is actually quite ideal device for the concept of stochastic computing, where you actually compute based on massive amounts of random bits. And for example, in this paper, we show some kind of toy application that is the classifications of email messages between spams and non-spams. And we show using this device, this could be done using, and counting all the circuitry, it could be done with only nanojoules per message. In this talk, I'm also going to focus on something that is even more non-classical and that is very much work in progress, which is to kind of also try to exploit the stochastic dynamics themselves. And that's due to the fact that these devices are very stochastic, but the stochasticity can be controlled. Like if you apply electrical current to the device, due to the physics spin torque effect, you can influence the relative stability of the two states. So that is presented here. For two different values of the current, one of the two states become more stable. And once again, the physics of this is very clear and very modeled. And we checked that the model from literature worked perfectly on the device. And what kind of caught our attention on this is that inspiration from neuroscience, there are a lot of work that kind of see neurons as oscillators that are also very noisy, and that where the computation source is really the fact that some of the oscillators, some of the neurons are going to synchronize or not synchronize. And we were interested with this kind of noisy objects, if we could replicate some of this behavior to eventually be able to do similar computation with very low energy, because a significant energy source will be the thermal noise that makes switch the nano devices. And here is also an illustration made by our student of a situation that is actually quite different, but just an illustration of how, in some situations, noise can actually be useful. So what our student did is that she take an image of a famous actress, and she just thresholds the image, like depending on pixel value, it becomes either white and black. And then she actually adds noise to this process. And what people would expect is that it would become even worse, but actually it becomes a lot better. The image is a lot more recognizable. And if you add even more noise, then it actually becomes bad again. So it's quite actually different from synchronization concepts, but it's just an illustration that there are situations where adding noise to a system is actually beneficial. And this has been studied very extensively in science, in natural process, in the brain, in climate theory. So that's kind of what we are looking after. So we have done many things, but I show this example that I believe is the most demonstrative. So what we take is one junction, one of our junction, and we apply a drive to it, a voltage like this, and this drive is subthreshold. It is not enough to actually switch the device between the two states. And so that is, so this is experimental result. So here is presented the mean frequency of the device, and you can see that if in this, for this point, we just applied the subthreshold input, and the mean frequency of the device is different from the mean frequency of the input that is here. But on the other hand, if you actually add electrical noise, even more noise than the noise that the junction has, you can see that the frequency increases, and at some point it actually locks to the frequency of the input. And that is what is seen here in the two cases. You can see that in this situation, the output totally matches the drive voltage, whereas for low noise it doesn't. And if you increase the noise even more, then you start to have these kind of glitches in the output, and the mean frequency increases again. It is not locked anymore to the input. And so that's, once again, where the system becomes more deterministic because you have added noise to it. And it is actually not an epiphenomenon, so we investigated quite largely the phenomenon as a function of drive voltage and drive frequency, so the regions where you observe synchronization, synchronizations are in red, and you can see quite a broad range. Of course, the higher the drive voltage, the broader the range is. And also what is interesting is that it can be seen for very large bands of frequency. It is not specially tied to the natural frequencies of the device. So this kind of noise-induced synchronization is already known in science. Actually, it is believed that in the Quaternary era, the alternance between glaciary and non-glaciary periods is due to this phenomenon, and there are many theories. And we were able to adapt one of them to the nano device, and you can see the experiments match a simple model. Also, yeah, I'm going to go quick on that. It becomes a little technical. So these experiments were made on quite a bigger, older devices. But since then, magnetic tunnel junctions have made a lot of progress. They have scaled dramatically, and in particular, they have become perpendicular. So this is more projections based on theory of if you scale the device to much smaller dimensions, how much energy this process would consume. And this is for different input frequency. And you can see the energy required to synchronize the device as a function of the diameter of the junction. And you can see that, so there are different strategies, but this is quite technical. I'm not going to explain. I'm happy to if somebody is interested. But you can see that there is a minimum, and the minimum actually corresponds to using the device at frequency, which is the natural mean frequency of the device. And this scales very much, and you realize that eventually you can synchronize at extremely low energy. We made some comparisons, like comparing energy to synchronize with another nanotechnology that we are also looking a lot at, which is the harmonic spin torque oscillators that Alicia mentioned yesterday, and also some comparison with CMOS low energy implementation, and we realize the superparamagnetic requires less energy. Of course, it is based on strong hypothesis that we actually managed to use this phenomenon to actually design the full system to actually use this synchronization to perform complex computation, which we are working on, but is not something that we have finished yet. So just as a conclusion, I wanted to highlight that even the classical magnetic tunnel junction, so the basic spintronic device, provides some physics that can allow quite unconventional uses that are interesting, as they can really allow using the device at the maximum of its energy efficiency. And so there is this possibility of intriguing computing schemes where the stochasticity plays a major role, but of course it's early work and a lot more needs to be done. And also I want to highlight that, so as Stuart Parkin showed yesterday, there are a lot of development in spintronics right now in academic labs, and these developments usually tend to make the device richer, more complicated physics than the standard magnetic tunnel junctions, so actually make them even more adapted for this kind of bio-inspired thinking. And I thank you for your attention.